Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. I'm going to do something today that I generally don't do, and that is I'm going to do a review of a lure, obviously a production lure. I usually don't do those kind of reviews because people fall in love with their lures, you know, it's like their girlfriends, and I'm not going to review people's choices in women. So, on that note, I bought this lure probably 3 months ago with the intent of giving it a video review. I thought, you know, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it as the Engineered Angler, and I'm going to give it an engineer's or lure designer's review. Now, I haven't even opened this thing, and I've never actually used a Whopper Plopper. But for those of you who don't know what a Whopper Plopper is, it's a topwater lure, and it's a noise-making topwater lure. The whole concept of this lure is to have a topwater lure with a propeller on it, and it's got a single blade. And as it goes through the water, it just plops. It makes a lot of noise, it makes bubbles. And then when you pause it, it stays floating. So there have been other attempts, sort of at noise making. You know, everyone has seen this. People call this devil's horse. And it's got a propeller in the front and a little micro propeller in the back. And this essentially just makes bubbles. It doesn't make a whole lot of noise. Then when people really wanted to get noisy, they got into the Buzzbaits. These make a lot of noise. But a buzzbait really isn't a topwater bait. It's usually used as a topwater bait, and that means that it's pulled fast enough that it stays at the surface, making a whole lot of noise. And if you're a lure maker, you've probably made one of these little innovations, right? Everybody's done this, I'm pretty sure. At least I have. Essentially putting a buzzbait blade in front of just a regular topwater lure. And just pull it along, make a bunch of noise, and then when you stop, it'll stay afloat, but it kind of does one of these things, you know, it folds up. So it isn't the most elegant solution, but it works if you are just hell-bent on making a bunch of noise with your topwater lure. So let's get right to this thing. I'm looking at it, and I can already see that there's a difference between the material of the main body right here, which looks to be a two-part piece. A little more paint on it than your typical Chinese assembled one. It's got some pretty good detail. So this propeller tail is made out of some kind of rubber, you can see, which is probably a good idea. I wonder if it changes shape with heat. That sleeve that you see right there is there to spread that friction load so that it doesn't catch. That's a really good idea. And then it's got a little steel ball there to protect it from the wire. You can see that the wire was then twisted to create this hook eye after the fact. Okay, let me mic this wire. So it's 0.046 inches. So the box says these are riveter C hooks. They're definitely sharp. The split rings look to be kind of light, but I suppose on a lure this small, that's not that big a deal. These hooks are O'Shaughnessy bend, but they look to be a little rounder than the typical one. They don't have as hard a return on the bend. Just looking at this dynamically, right, I like it that they have that sleeve on there. That's really good. There's a very small gap in the middle. I don't see any kind of bearing pad or any kind of Teflon little washer or anything to reduce the friction there, but it doesn't seem to be bad. It's not noisy, that's for sure, so you're not going to be counting on noise from that. Small enough gap where I don't know that much will get in there. Not having used this before, I'm a little surprised at the placement of this tie-on eye. I would have expected it lower on the body. And I say that because, well, first of all, that's the kind of thing you typically do on a topwater lure. So the fact that it has a single propeller means that every time this little propeller comes down in the water, it's going to have a load of force here and want to force the nose down. Now, it looks like they fattened the body up right here, maybe for looks, or maybe because they thought they needed a little more flotation here forward. Now, this lure has been around a long time. Whopper Ploppers are not brand new, but apparently they just really got into vogue the last couple of years. People are really liking them. They make them in a lot of different sizes. I have yet to cast this in the water, so let's walk down to the dock. My prediction is that it'll probably work great. I just want to see how far it casts and how it retrieves. Now, I'm a little concerned that when it's way out there, a long cast, and that line has dropped down to the water, that when you pull on it, this thing's going to go underwater. But I would think they worked that out, but just looking at it geometrically, it looks like it'll do that. We'll see. Okay, so we're down here at the dock. I've tied it directly on this mono leader, and I've just put a regular cinch knot on it. Let's just bubble it across the top here and see what it looks like. Look at that. Man, that thing is a little blender. Look at that. Well, that's pretty cool. And then when it sits tail down. Well, that's to be expected because of that tail material has to be heavier. It has to sink, because if it doesn't, it would just skip across the top. So that works really well. Let's see if I give it a long cast and I let the line settle down, and oh, it looks good. Oh, it goes under. There it is. Yeah, once the line is in the water, it goes under. Huh. Let's try that again. I think you have to keep your rod tip really high. Okay, so when it's way out there, if you let it sit, right there it goes under. There it goes. Right there it's underwater. You can see it's not doing the wobble thing. See how it ended up underwater? See that? And if you're fishing with fluorocarbon, it's worse, because fluorocarbon will sink anything. So yeah, it goes right underwater right there. Right there it's underwater. So you gotta kinda keep your rod tip up. Let's try a cast. Now I'm casting downwind, so it's gonna help, but oh yeah, it casts nice. It casts well. Get the rod tip up, it stays up. But if I lower the rod tip, it ends up underwater. See? I knew it. All right, so you can't escape physics. All right, well, let's go back to the shop. Maybe we can modify the lure. Okay, so first of all, we're not gonna play with the propeller. It rotates really nicely. I don't think we're gonna mess with that at all. So let me draw up the front of the lure real quick. So you have a very typical shape of the lure on the front, and some nice details embossed in the plastic. The one thing that captured my attention right away was the location of this tie-on eye. Typically on a topwater lure, if you're paying attention, you'll notice that the tie-on eye is below the center line. If you're pulling from below the center line, it wants to pull the head of the lure up. And so that's really what you want on most any topwater lure. So that's the first place I'm going to start. That's what I would change first. That would give me a little bit of leverage to get that head up out of the water. Now, the other thing you could do if you were designing it is to keep that head a little broader going to the blunt end. And that would give you a little more flotation. Obviously, I can't do that with this lure right now. But you can also give yourself a little bit of a planing surface. Now, I'm exaggerating it here. Essentially a flat spot just below the nose, right at the chin area, that gives you a surface to plane on, just like kind of like the front of a water ski, so that when you pull on this thing, it wants to jump out of the water. It wants to stay up on the surface, and it won't allow the line to drag it down underwater. So let's do it. Let's go ahead and start cutting parts off and reshaping the front of this thing. Let's see if we can make it a little better. that should do it. Let's take it off there. That looks pretty good. It's nice and solid. Pretty much what I was talking about. Let's see if it works. It could be a total fail. Maybe I destroyed and ruined a $12 lure. But oh well. I know a guy who makes lures. Okay, we're back. And we've got our newly shaped Whopper Plopper. Looking pretty stylish. All right, well, let's see. Looks like it still works. Let's see. Yeah, it's staying on top. Let's see if it continues. This is like right where it would stop. No, look at that. Staying right on top. Sweet. Before, if I kept a steady crank, it would get underwater and stay there all the way back. All right, let's give it a long cast and try it. Not that you can see this, but yeah, you can tell it wants to go nose down, because when I first start, it goes nose down and pops back out because that flat surface brings it back out. So, oh yeah. And you can see I got my rod tip way down. See that? Look at that. Heck yeah. That worked perfect. Well, I'm pretty happy with the results. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have, subscribe and share it with your friends. If you have questions on this or any of the other videos, please go ahead and ask the question. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.